Today I'm going to be facing a job that I've been avoiding for some time. Basically, bought this about 6 months ago, and there's no record of this job ever being done, and it's the timing belt or the cam belt. And I've got the vehicle on chocks, and it is actually a 93 model with the factory power steering, so that might make it a little bit interesting. So we're going to have to try and remove the covers, and there's not a great deal of working room in these engine bays, so I think I'm going to take the battery out, as it'll give me a little bit of an advantage. So I've disconnected the negative first and the positive second, the reason being you can't get a spanner short into earth. And there's just one pesky little bolt, it looks like could be 13mm down there, and it is 13mm, so we'll whip that out. And the battery, well, that was well shoehorned in, but we now have a view of the timing cover and a bit more workroom. And that incidentally is the split charge relay I replaced in an earlier video. This one's actually missing a couple of bolts right at the very top either side, but I used my best Tetris skills to get this one out. This one's right against the engine bracket, so that takes a bit of doing, but I've got it out. So I've now got the vehicle jacked up using the stock jack, and I've placed an axle stand for safety, and we now see the business end. You can see there is an oil leak there. I have actually ordered a crank seal on the assumption that it could be that. That's what the advice says to do. So the next thing I want to do is loosen these 13mm bolts and lower the engine, and then we'll be able to get at the crank bolts. Well, I've got my trusty jack with a block of wood underneath it, so that should support the weight of the engine as I lower the mount. I've just had a bit of movement there, you can perhaps see how things are slightly askew. And the bolts for this were pretty rusty, so it's obviously not been done in a while. I don't know what I'm going to find when I get in there. And I've just got one more bolt to back out. It pays to support the engine as much as possible whilst removing them. And that's the last one liberated. You can see the corrosion under there. That's what I've been up against. I had to oil a couple of them and go forwards and backwards. The first one come out easier. So hopefully we've lowered the engine just enough to get a tool on there, an impact tool. And with this being the power steering model, we've got this to remove, so it's just removing that nut there, loosening it off, and that should move, and that's the tension adjustment. I'm just checking to see what deflection we've got in it. I think it's about 1/2 inch. So we've backed the 13mm nut off, and we've got an 1/2 inch drive socket that just nicely goes in there. And then we can loosen the belt to go a bit further. So that's the power steering belt. It's not in bad nick actually. Could be used in an emergency. And I'm thinking the next logical step could be to remove all 4 of these little bleeders. And the power steering pulley comes off like so. So we've just got this nut to remove now. We basically have to remove that nut, and you're going to require a 36mm socket, and I've got a splined one. I do wish I had a hex one this size, as I can only just place it, and I did buy a deep socket because it comes in handy for many applications, and I really needed a shallow socket for this. I'd have got better placement. Well, I've dropped the jack a tad and we've got a better placement now, so I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. Let's just give it some with the impact gun in reverse. Well, that put up a bit of a fight. That took about 3 goes to get that off with the penetrating fluid been applied at least twice, and we've now liberated that nut so we can proceed to take the casings off. Well, I've had to expend a good bit of effort into coaxing this bolt out. It was much longer than expected, and you'll know which one it is because it's right at the front with a nut on it. So we've now got a visual on the belts, and there's very little room in here to get the cover off, and I want to totally remove it, so we'll keep using our Tetris skills to liberate that. So I've moved our power steering pump back using a socket, and there's just a couple, actually one higher up than that. There it is, just to get the bottom cover off. So that's the lower timing cover removed, and we do have a bit of an oil leakage issue in that area. And that's the upper timing cover. Now, I did find it was easier to remove the upper one from the bottom, so once the lower one was removed, we were just able to pull that down without too much fuss. Now, timing marks, some say they are faint and some say they are non-existent, but I'm going to have a look for them. Well, I spent quite a bit of time with a drill wheel going over this crankshaft pulley, and I did find a little mark there. So that's aligned with that. And more surprisingly, when I went up top, on the old fuel pump, somebody else's Tipex marks I've aligned there. So that's good news. So I've highlighted that with a blob of Tipex, and somebody else's marks there I've aligned, but yet we haven't seen any proper timing marks on that, so I think I'm going to give it another rotation and just keep my eye out. It's meant to align, I believe, with that bolt. There's actually some blue going off there, and then we've got some blue there, so it's at least 2 belts it's had on, and there is actually a dot there which aligns with a pointy bit of this bolt about 3 o'clock. So that's all the timing marks found for the cam and the crankshaft. Well, I've got the lower timed up on the marks, and one thing I have noticed, if we can just get the camera in, you can see there's a little indent on a tooth there. Hopefully that'll come into focus. It's really difficult getting the angles for this because we've got very little room. The pointing stick there, you can see it. So I'm wondering if I did see a diagram where they timed that up like on there, and then that aligned with that bolt, which would seem about right. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark that off with the old Tipex. Well, I never did find the correct point for that, so we've Tipexed it. T for top. I've doubled down on some of the other markings. That's the crank. You see the nuts on, and that's the cam with the bottom of the timing belt denoted as B. So I've got the nut on just to turn it. So I'm going to remove the top belt first. I'm going to make a start on the tensioner. Would you believe it's actually 11mm? It's one of the rare examples where you need an 11mm socket. And there's very little room with all these pipes going off. That's not helping one bit. Well, I actually did a bit better working from underneath. And that's the tensioner wiggled out, and it's not looking too clever. Plenty of corrosion on it. And that's the old timing belt. Pretty good nick actually. I did find it easier to remove it from the the bottom pulley. There's not a lot of room in there. And this is the cam tensioner, 14mm top, 13mm bottom. So in order to remove the belt, looks like we have to undo these 8mm bolts. As you can see, everything's having a good oil bath, and there's actually a timing mark there. So once we take that off, we do have a reference point. We've got our old belt here, and that was the crank mark. That was just an extra one I put in, and I've counted the teeth, and up to that point, that's between the marks, there's 35 teeth. So this belt is actually pre-marked, and it's got a mark in there and another there, and there are 35 teeth between them. That's just one of the marks I'm copying over, just to be doubly sure, because I don't really care where the marks are. I care more about getting it right. And this is the brand I've got. That's the kit I've purchased. So we'll delve into that in a bit. Here's the new pulley I got, and this is the old. Now basically, turn it round. You apply the tension through these two holes here. So there was, I understand, a special tool which is long since gone. I couldn't get one. So I've had a little idea to use the holes to tension, just something quick and easy. We'll see if it works. So here's the idea. I've got a couple of bolts here. I just want to put like a lever between them, apply the tension, and then we'll nip the lower bolt up. If it all works out, we're going to have the top nut and bolt in, so that's going to take a bit of space up, but they are going to be long enough. And then we can just whip it all out, and then we should be timed. Well, that worked quite well. We've got the tensioner on there, and all the timing marks are tallying, even the ones are duplicated, like that one there. This one ever so slightly off, but it's the best fit I can achieve. If we go a tooth the other way, it's too much. And as long as that stays aligned, I don't need to Tipex the marks on. So we'll have a go at fitting this. And it's going to be a bit awkward, I think, for access. Well, we've got the tensioner for the fuel pump, and I've got everything in order it came off of. So I like to keep it that way. And in there's a little spring, and what you get is that bit, so we have to transfer these bits over to that. I've got a screwdriver, I'll just push it in, so I'll just push it in like so, and rebuild accordingly. Well, I've counted the teeth on the new timing belt, and it's quite rigid compared to its older, more worn counterpart, and we've marked that off, so we'll have a go at refitting that. We've got the belt on, and we'd actually rest a heavy object on the top of it as it kept jumping off, and you can actually get your knickers in a bit of a twist with the markings. Because the way I've done it, it's that's the 50% mark, and the other marking's a bit less, so I did get it flipped. So here's the view of the timing belt from underneath. You can see there's not a lot of room in here. We've got his mark aligned just there, and that's where we need to put the tensioner roller. When it comes to reassembly, I've made a little tool, and what we're going to do, we're going to push the tensioner out and then lock it off simultaneously, and then we should have room to get the belt on. See there, we're going to push on it, push it right out, and then we're going to lock it off with a, I believe it's an 11mm socket, and then we can release the tension on the tensioner when we get the belt on, and we'll just double check as timing marks. That last belt were an absolute nightmare. It's basically designed to be too short to go around the tensioner. It feels like you almost need a tooth extra and it'd go. So what I actually did for the timing mark is I got the bulk of it on. I got it like round to about here, and this bit were getting tricky. So I just turned the engine backwards, and that seemed to do the trick. So anyway, I want to turn the engine forwards 2 turns before we attempt to start it. One thing to be wary of is there's a little bit of clearance here with the jack. We don't want to lower our brand new belt onto this bit of chassis and damage it. So we're going to do 2 full turns, and I'm going to do it off camera because it's a 4-stroke, so we need to get 2 full turns, and if you don't feel any resistance, we'll then get on the key. So that's the cam timing mark coming round, so we'll just go to the crank. Well, before we get carried away, we've got to torque a few things up. I'm going to slacken that off and re-torque it to the 18 Newton meters. That's the timing belt, fuel pump side tensioner. And then we've got the crankshaft here. Now 32 Newton meters for the top, 21 Newton meters at the bottom. I'm going to recheck the tension of this belt. What I actually did is I put a couple of bolts in, levered it. I did use a ring spanner. It was actually stepped. It was the, I believe it was the 13mm end I used for that, and that step gave me access in whilst I was using a lever to tighten it up. Well, I've used my judgment with a belt tension, and that's pretty much what it is. You can just see a tiny bit of the window there. So I'll just have a good check around before I start building up the engine. We've got a new power steering belt, so I'll just compare the size of that with the old one. And that looks pretty good to me for a quick comparison. I'll check what I can several times over. Got no daft tools anywhere. This mount went on a lot easier than I expected. Basically I just jacked it up and it aligned something like the bolts have gone back with copperies, and we're getting to the stage now where I've got to know the moment of truth. These moments do make me nervous, but we've done everything possible in its power, so we'll give it a whirl. Well, I had me worried there for a moment. The glow plugs didn't want to start, but yeah, we're running. I'm really pleased with that. We've got power. Sounds good. Well, many thanks for watching, and why not subscribe to learn of more testing repair possibilities.